Time flies, man. We are almost at the end of the year. Here I put down 10 best games of 2024 until now. I may miss some games, I couldn't fit them all in one video. So I'm sorry for that, but I am trying my best. Starting with Elden Ring, the DLC, Shadow of the Erdtree. How many times do we see a game-winning game of the year, and after some years the same game competing for the same title? So, first off, the moment you start Shadow of the Erdtree, it's like being pulled back into this dark, twisted dreamscape. You've still got that huge, open-world feeling, but it's even more haunting. The environments are breathtaking, somewhere between unsettling and gorgeous, like the whole world is collapsing. By the time I wrapped up my first run of the DLC, I was in that sweet spot of both exhausted and exhilarated. You know, that feeling where you've been through the ringer, but in the best possible way? Yeah, that's Shadow of the Erdtree. If you're a fan of Elden Ring, this DLC isn't just more of the same. It's a full-blown upgrade. The lore goes deeper, the fights get crazier, and the world just feels so much more dangerous. Number 9 is Dragon's Dogma 2. So, you're back in this wild, sprawling open world that feels alive. Like, seriously, this world is constantly throwing surprises at you. You'll be walking through a dense forest 1 minute, and then suddenly, a freaking griffin swoops down out of nowhere and snatches up one of your party members. It's that kind of game where anything can happen, and you're just trying to stay alive long enough to deal with it. The scale of the game is mind-blowing. Everything feels bigger and more dangerous, but it's also more inviting. You just want to keep exploring. Even when you know the next area might be your doom, the story is still that classic mix of epic fantasy with a little mystery thrown in. You've got that whole Chosen One vibe again, but it's not cliche, it's immersive. There are deep, meaningful choices to make, and they don't hold your hand. Overall, Dragon's Dogma 2 is everything I wanted from a sequel and more. It's challenging but fair, vast without feeling overwhelming, and packed with memorable moments that make you want to talk about it for hours. Whether you're a veteran from the original or new to the series, this game is an adventure you'll want to dive into head first. Just be ready to lose a good chunk of your life to it. You'll be hooked. Stellar Blade. This game is something else. So you play as this absolute badass named Eve, who is just decked out in futuristic gear. She's not your typical action heroine. She's got this cool, collected vibe, but you can tell she's carrying some deep emotional weight, and that adds layers to the story. The game drops you into this post-apocalyptic, dystopian world where humanity is basically on the verge of extinction. The whole setup gives you Major Nier, Automata vibes with that haunting, melancholic atmosphere. You're trying to save humanity, but at the same time, you're questioning what's left of it that's even worth saving. The combat is fast, brutal, and all about timing and precision. Oh, you can switch between blades, heavy weapons, and even tech-based attacks. There's this one move where you throw out this massive energy blade, and it feels so satisfying to pull off in the middle of a combo. Number 7, we got Alan Wake 2. I was so hyped for this game, and it delivered. This game was like an intense thriller movie, like, seriously. If you loved the psychological horror and narrative-driven vibe of the first game, this sequel takes everything that was great about the original and pushes it into some next-level, mind-bending territory. I'm talking dark, eerie, atmospheric storytelling where reality and fiction start blurring in the most unsettling ways. The game is beautifully designed too. Visuals are top-notch. Alan Wake 2 is everything fans of the first game could have hoped for and more. It's creepy, atmospheric, and packed with a story that'll mess with your head in the best possible way. You'll be glued to your screen, flashlight in hand, trying to piece together this twisted narrative while desperately hoping the dark doesn't swallow you whole. If you're a fan of psychological horror and intense storytelling, this game is going to blow your mind. As someone who has played the original Final Fantasy VII and absolutely loved FFVI Remake, I went into Rebirth with insanely high expectations, and let me tell you, it delivers in ways that will blow your mind. So, if you've played the remake, you know that it was more than just a shot-for-shot recreation of the original. It was a reimagining, and Rebirth continues that trend in such a bold and surprising way. This isn't just a nostalgia trip. They're doing something new while still honoring what made the original so iconic. The world has opened up in ways that make you feel like you're experiencing a completely new game, even though the familiar characters and story beats are there. And man, the scale of it all, it's on another level. Combat is just as intense and satisfying as it was in the remake, but they've added new layers that make it even better. The hybrid real-time / turn-based system is so much fun. You're constantly switching between characters, using their unique abilities in creative ways. There's more synergy between your party members, so you can pull off these amazing team-up attacks that feel super powerful. Every fight feels like this epic, cinematic experience, especially when you're up against those huge bosses that Final Fantasy is known for. And the music, I can't forget the music. They've taken the original soundtrack, which was already legendary, and remixed it in ways that give you chills. Hearing those familiar themes with a modern twist, especially during some of the game's biggest moments, is so nostalgic, but also feels fresh and exciting. There's this perfect balance between the old and the new, and it just works that if you thought the journey ended with Remake, you haven't seen anything yet. You know that feeling when you strap into some heavy power armor and feel invincible? That's how the game starts you off. You play as Lieutenant Tidus again, and the first thing that hit me was how this game makes you feel like a literal walking tank. You got that bolter in hand, and the sound design, oh man. Every shot you fire feels like the weight of the Emperor's wrath coming down on these Tyranids. It's not just a point-and-shoot kind of game, though. You're up against swarms of Tyranids, and when I say swarms, I mean hundreds. It's overwhelming, but in a way that's also a total adrenaline rush. One moment you're ripping through Tyranids with your Chainsword, blood and alien bits flying everywhere, and the next you're unloading with your bolter. You're fighting on these war-torn planets, each one more epic than the last. It feels like you're in the middle of a galactic war. Overall, Space Marine 2 is just a wild ride. It's brutal, chaotic, and ridiculously fun, especially when you play with friends. It doesn't just throw you into big battles. It makes every moment feel epic. Honestly, I'm still processing how awesome it was, and I can't wait to jump back in for another session. You'll love it if you're into intense, large-scale combat, with that classic Warhammer 40k brutality. So let me tell you about Palworld, because it's one of those games that feels like a mix of adorable and totally unhinged in the best way possible. Imagine a world where you're capturing and raising creatures called pals that look like they walked straight out of a Pokemon game, but then you give them guns. Yeah, it's like that. It's a wild ride of creature collecting with a darker, more chaotic twist. The gameplay is what really stands out. It's got this huge open world vibe where you're not just collecting these cute pals, but you're also using them to fight, farm, and even build. One minute you're admiring how cute your pal looks. The next you're sending them off to work in a factory or defend your base with machine guns. It's ridiculous and strangely satisfying. The whole mix of survival, crafting, and exploration keeps things fresh. You'll be going through different biomes, capturing new pals, and even battling some massive bosses who can be captured too, but that takes some serious effort. There's also this sense of freedom where you decide how you want to play. You can live a peaceful life, farming and raising your pals, or you can embrace the chaos, pillaging other villages and running into poachers. The game feels like a breath of fresh air. It's a bit of a mashup, part Pokemon, part survival game, with just enough chaos and crafting to keep you entertained for hours. If you're into the idea of creature collecting but want something more offbeat and unpredictable, Palworld is definitely worth diving into. Infinite Wealth feels like the wildest, most emotional Yakuza game I've ever played, and it delivers on both the insane, over-the-top action, and the heartfelt storytelling. The game kicks off with Ichiban Kasuga, our goofy yet lovable hero, getting swept into yet another conspiracy, this time in Hawaii of all places. From a horribly awkward first date to a run-in with a vengeful VTuber, the humor is spot on. Combat's had some fun tweaks, too, encouraging more strategy with movement-based attacks and combo skills. Plus, the job system is back, so you can switch characters between all sorts of hilarious roles, from chef to action star, adding even more craziness to the battles. The side activities are just as quirky as ever. If you're a fan of the series, Kiryu's emotional arc will hit you hard. You'll get to see some old characters return, and it really feels like a celebration of everything that's come before. Infinite Wealth isn't just another entry in the Yakuza franchise. It's a massive, emotional, and wild ride through crime, friendship, and utter madness. Helldivers 2 is a wild ride, especially if you're diving in with a squad of friends. The game leans hard into that classic Starship Trooper-style chaos. You're constantly surrounded by overwhelming enemy forces, and everything that can go wrong will go wrong. Trust me, it's hilarious and intense all at once. Helldivers 2 is brutal. Friendly fire is always on, so the moment things heat up, you're just as likely to take out your own teammates as you are the enemies. And that's where the chaos really begins now. There are some hiccups. Technical issues like matchmaking bugs and server drops can be frustrating, but when it works, it works. The humor, the teamwork, and the intense firefights make it worth coming back to again and again. Sure, it's not perfect, but it's one of those games where the social aspect and the laughs make it unforgettable. If you're into tactical co-op shooters and you don't mind the occasional mishap, seriously, the chaos is half the fun. Helldivers 2 is definitely worth the dive. Probably the game of the year. Beyond the stunning visuals and fluid combat, Black Myth Wukong is packed with an almost mystical atmosphere that sets it apart from typical action RPGs. The world is rich with Chinese folklore, and every boss encounter feels like facing a mythical legend straight out of an ancient tale. The attention to detail is insane. Whether it's the architecture or the characters themselves, everything oozes with mythological depth. What's interesting is how varied the gameplay becomes. You're not just wielding a staff. You're using all sorts of transformations and spells. You can transform into bugs, or even a giant creature to get the edge in battle. And these abilities play into a sort of Metroidvania element, allowing you to revisit areas once you've unlocked new powers. There are multiple biomes, each dripping with detail, whether you're trekking through misty mountains, dense forests, or ancient temples. The environments constantly push you to stop and admire the scenery, from intricate rock carvings to ornate, ancient statues that tell stories of their own. The bosses themselves are these massive, intimidating beings that range from grotesque demons to larger-than-life mythical creatures, and they bring a level of unpredictability to the combat, forcing you to learn patterns and adapt on the fly. His is easily one of the most impressive indie-developed games I've played in a long time. So here is my list of top 10 games of 2024 until now. I probably have missed some games. I would be glad to hear those names and your lists of best games of 2024. Let me know what you think, which game's gonna win this year's Game of the Year. If you watch the video till the end, why not like the video and subscribe the channel, as it helps me to continue this journey. Until then, keep gaming, keep laughing, stay pixel perfect. Gaming Pulse out.